Welcome back to another episode of Harmonious at Lunch, the show that fuels your business success. I'm Brandon Gano, your host and guide through the world of harmonious business growth. Today, we're unlocking powerful strategies with industry experts to help your business thrive. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or executive, you are in the right place. Join me and our incredible guests today on the journey to clarity, growth, and success. It is time to revolutionize your approach to business. Let's dive in with another episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Welcome back to some more bite-sized business advice, or as my lovely guest here today has described this show, the jazz of podcasting. More on that later, but we're going to dive in and unpack how to grow your business, and really more than that, how to become a next level CEO. I find a lot of small business owners in that growth mode. They're doing things that got them here, but are not necessarily doing the things that are going to get them there, wherever there is. You define there. We're going to show you how to get you to that in the most efficient way possible. So before we go any further, let's welcome my guest, a good friend at this point, Scott Levy of Result Maps. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
I'm excited to unpack this. You have a super cool software, which we will go over later at some point in the show. That's how we met. But I want to talk about how do we develop that practice of becoming a CEO? So first and foremost, do you agree with what I said about where most people are not really doing CEO activities as small business owners? And what do you typically see?
1,000%. That's exactly what we see. And that's what all of us who've built companies, that's what we experience. In the early stages, it's like you're pushing the structure onto the runway while you're building it. You're doing everything. And there's no incentive to start off as a CEO unless somebody hands you a bundle of money and you hire in, right? You've got to get out there and brute force so much. But if you don't very quickly kind of jump into the plane as it's on the runway and take the wheel and be the pilot, to act as the CEO, you stay stuck in that I'm going to do everything mode. And what happens as the business grows is people tend to just work harder, and that's always got a ceiling. Now that ceiling may be at 1 million, it may be at 3 million, 8. I've seen it be as high as 20, but it's there, and it always looks kind of the same. And is, kind of that moment of, hey, where's my life going? Because this is now controlling my life instead of supporting a lifestyle. So you've got to, at some point, make that shift if you want to be healthy and keep enjoying the business, keep seeing the business grow. You've got to actually become a CEO, not just a founder.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things. I'm surprised with the 20 million, to be honest with you, because what I see too is there is that ceiling, but quite often before that ceiling comes in terms of operations, it's actually the human being. They go to burnout, and they're actually just physically and mentally exhausted. It could come anywhere. I do see that happen a little bit sooner than the operational struggles do. But talk to me about that. I mean, I'm sure you've seen that too. What is it? Just the brute force that causes the burnout?
Yes. And the 20 million example, that was an outlier.
Yeah.
And they'd already been through a couple of different burnouts. Then they got really serious about it. But they were in a great market. And most of us don't enter a market like that. This individual was the right place, right time. You have to be very, very lucky to get it anywhere like that. So he was at, I think, 18 million when we met him. But let's see, let me go back to your question. Burnout happens earlier. I think burnout prevents you from going further. Right? I think that burnout prevents the growth ultimately, because you can't keep growing the business, or you can no longer, maybe you're a sales machine, but you're not delivering. You're churning customers too fast. I've seen that happen a lot. You're getting the business in and you're not able to just fulfill the orders or the services or whatever it may be. The business just can't keep up. So then you stop selling and you go focus on the operations, and then sales slumps. And yeah, you're on a hamster wheel. We've got a little graphic of the stressed out hamster wheel founder. And we see this all the time. And as a founder, the problem there is it's a lonely gig. It's not something that a lot of people can relate to. You know, if you're very, very fortunate and lucky, maybe you've got a spouse that understands it. But that is, again, rarely, because it is such a unique journey. So it can be very difficult to realize, hey, wait, I'm experiencing a thing. This isn't just me being stressed out. It's not something unique to my business. I'm trapped in the normal growth pattern of starting a business.
Yeah. So let's get out of that. This is not a fun place to be, not a fun place to talk about. Maybe you, the listener, find yourself there right now. So, Scott, you have for us the 3 things that every CEO needs to transform their business. I'm excited to unpack this because it's one of those things that that as small business owners moving to CEO, it's so simple, yet it's so overlooked. So I want you to break this down for me in your structure, your format. What are these 3 things that we need to do to become a CEO that transforms our business?
That's exactly right. So these are foundational practices. They will not by themselves fix everything, but they're the things you put in place that allow you to create a virtuous cycle so you're fully out. The first thing is you need clarity, and clarity in terms of where are we trying to go as a business and how are we planning to get there in the short term. So in business parlance, there are a lot of different frameworks with different words, but essentially we're talking about our vision and some form of strategy that we've reduced to specific goals, right? Now, it could be rocks, it could be objectives and key results, it could be wildly important goals. Pick your terminology. You've got to have that clarity as the first part of things. The second component is rhythm. So we're on the Harmonious podcast, so let the drummer add some rhythm here. We've got to get into some very specific cadences to keep the business running smoothly. We need to have a weekly meeting where we're checking in on progress against those goals, against whatever form of key performance indicators we've set up. And by the way, those are also part of getting clarity on and visibility into your vision. We've got to look at what issues are surfacing. We want to do that on a weekly basis as part of a regular practice. We also believe that there's a third component that goes with that, which is getting everybody to take ownership on a daily basis by communicating 3 simple things. And these don't have to be done in a meeting. You can put them into a document or a Slack channel or a Teams channel. We've got software that does all that for you, but it's 3 simple questions. What got done? What's the one thing I'm going to work on next? And is anything stuck? And that only takes 90 seconds. So it takes 7 minutes a week per person. And yet that visibility saves hours and hours and ultimately days per week of time. So now you've got clarity, the first component. You've got a rhythm that you're checking in weekly. And as well as weekly, you want to do, I left this out, but you want to do monthly, some kind of mid-range, either quarterly or every 6 weeks, whatever your sprint cycle is. And then you've got the third thing of daily ownership, and everybody's going to check in every day and show the progress we're making. It's a very powerful practice. You get those 3 things in place and you'll immediately start to get a better sense of how the business is doing, where the challenges are, where the growth opportunities are for me as a leader. Because now, ultimately, as that founder, you have to start asking, as a friend of mine, Brian Smith, says, who do I have to become today to take my business to the next level? You're not going to have good answers to that if you don't have the visibility and those rhythms and that ownership. You're going to be kind of wondering and, kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall. So with these 3 essentials, you get the consistency you need.
Yeah, I think that really is the missing piece. Step 3 in your formula there is where most people fall apart, because you can have all the clarity you want in the world. And we see people have vision boards, they have dreams and goals lists that they do at the start of the year. Or as you mentioned, rocks, which if you're a listener of this show, you know how we feel about rocks and that model. So we're not going to go into that. But I think a lot of businesses have some version of clarity. It's the measuring and consistent updates on those goals and visions of where people fall apart. And what I tend to see in companies when we're going and consult with them is, again, they have the vision, they have the clarity, but then I say, okay, what are we doing about it? Like, what is your team telling you? And what usually is happening is the owner or founder, CEO, is the center of the feedback loop. So the employees are always coming back to them and saying, either here's what I did, here's what I need, here are my questions. And often that's the bottleneck of the organization, because they have 50 employees. They're answering to 50 people every single day, or whenever there's a challenge, they can never get outside of that. So talk to me about that transition process to just going from getting those things coming to the CEO, rather than in the process you've outlined and in your software, getting them in a central location that everybody has access to.
Yes. And so what happens is you've got these things in one place where everybody can see it, and you've got this rhythm. And the first thing that happens is you notice where the gaps are. You notice that maybe certain things aren't getting done week to week. And then if you need to double click, you can see, okay, well, this person's what they're reporting on a day-to-day basis, it's not that specific. It's not very meaningful. There's not a lot of clarity on how that fits together into our bigger picture. And having all that in one place is really important. Equally, being able to communicate effectively around that information without having to go to a lot of different sources, and without having people kind of have the out of losing track and kind of blowing it off, which is what frequently happens, right? I think everybody can relate. All your listeners, I'm sure, can relate to that annual plan that gets rolled out in January or whenever, and then it's forgotten about by June. It's on the shelf. Now we're back into doing the work, so we haven't come back to it. What we're doing is we're keeping things front and center, and then we're giving you the tools to make sure your communication is crisp. You have ways to put things into context. People can understand how these things fit together, and you're developing these habits of daily, weekly, monthly, so that they're not things you have to think about. Early on, what we've seen happen is, before I had a software company, is you'd roll this out. We'd say, we're going to do this. We're going to check in every day. We're going to do this thing. We're going to have our weekly meetings, but the meetings are poorly managed. The daily check-ins are, there maybe one person provides good information, but everybody else is mumbling, or maybe non-important issues start to monopolize the meeting, because we've made the commitment of what our priorities are and what our vision is. Now we can see where there are gaps. We can see how these things fit together. And furthermore, if we, as the founder, start to take things off course, which honestly, that's the biggest reason things go off course, we've given our people a way to push back on us in a healthy way. Ideally saying, well, this is what you said, and I just need clarity from you, versus what can happen otherwise when the founder is like this, the hub and the spoke. Everybody's coming to the founder feels beat up on. Why are you challenging me? We talked about this. No, you didn't talk with that person about it. You talked with that other person about it, or you were thinking about it over the weekend because it's always in your brain. We forget the conversations we've had. It's not tracked. And that's not a healthy system. So what we're doing is we're creating a healthy system. Everybody's got the information. We can communicate as a team in the same way. The Lakers might tell LeBron it's time for him to step up, or the Mavericks might tell Luka or Kyrie they need to step up. Right? Our teams can tell us, sorry, basketball fan, everybody, playoffs are going on now. But our teams can now tell us, hey, leader, I need you to step up and provide consistency for me here, because you said this thing, I understood it to mean this. Did I not understand it? Or do you need to take some ownership? You can have a much healthier conversation without it being kind of a personal conflict. It becomes more of a process examination than an interpersonal conflict.
Which is powerful too, because it removes emotions, and that's obviously what gets in the way in those scenarios. And I'm curious too about the management of the business from a true CEO perspective. When we don't have any sort of a system around this, or we just have goals and visions, we don't have the cadence, and we don't have that structure that we're managing. It's very easy to get squirrel brained, right? And just chase the next shiny object and say, no, I believe that, we have this vision. I think this new path will get us there quicker. That I think is just a really good way to spin your wheels in business and never get anywhere and frustrate the rest of your organization and your team. So leveraging this framework, do you find that teams actually get unstuck, and to use the same metaphor, put rubber to the road and launch forward? Like, what's the difference in people that use your software before they start to use it, who are maybe in that trap, versus when they do start to use it and be consistent? What's the overall outcome?
Yeah, what we hear from our customers, especially founder CEO, is, wow, I can see everything in one place. I see what's going on. And if I need to double click, I can. But because I'm seeing us make progress week over week, month over month, I'm gaining confidence, and I'm just kind of laying out the direction. I can think more strategically. I can be out there doing the CEO things, whether it's recruiting or business development or partnership development, whatever the case may be. I'm much less worried about what happens operationally because I'm gaining confidence. And then the teams are happy because, it tends to be the leader that can blow a lot of things up. And I say that as one of those leaders also. I've been as guilty of it as anybody. So the team now has a structure where, to them, it may seem like they're holding the leader accountable, but to the leader, it's just like, I can now see what's been in my brain. I have a place to put it. And because of that, I'm no longer stressed out. Is this falling through the cracks? What about this other thing? Because that's what tends to fuel a lot of that squirrel-like behavior, right? We're worried that we're forgetting something, or what about this issue? What about that issue? Now there's a place to put those issues so they can be prioritized and handled effectively. And I can see that getting done. And the team, by the same token, experiences, hey, Scott got a lot easier to deal with. Like, instead of, jumping on a call with me and venting about all his frustrations, which may or may not have anything to do with me, we have a structured place where that information is going, and we're talking about it like adults, solving problems instead of creating personal issues. So those things, we're very happy when our customers tell us about experiencing that. And they'll say things like, this is really a way of thinking. And whether they're running a business operating system or they're not even thinking of it that way, that's what we hear most consistently that gets us excited. Like, you're helping us think about this and communicate differently. Because that's really what we're about, is like, we feel like software, to get on the soapbox, strategy execution software should make it easier to communicate, easier to transform, and easier to get visibility. It shouldn't just be about, now thou shalt call your goal this, and now thou shalt use this language, and we're going to have this style of meeting. Like, it's, and I'm not picking on any one system, because I've heard this with all of them. When people get so wrapped up in the process, they forget about the people part of that equation. It's the Harmonious podcast. I alluded to rhythm. I'm a musician. I love all types of music. I'm not going to sit here and tell you like, well, I like hip hop more than Bach because of XYZ. Sometimes I listen to Bach. Sometimes I listen to hip hop. It's not that listening to one or the other invalidates the other. They're different vibes to me. And all of these tools are useful in business, but we've got to make it easier for people to learn them and adopt them and get value out of them faster. Otherwise, as you mentioned, it's going to be hard for a team. Sorry, this was actually on the previous interview I was on, but we're talking about how if you're the one leading the charge to transform the business as the CEO, your team's got to follow you. They have to buy in. If you're not making it easier for them to buy in, it's much harder to get that buy-in. You've got to make it easy for them to buy the transformation.
Yeah, and I agree. I agree completely. The only thing, where I see that as a problem is, we'll use your analogy. If you have a company who loves listening to, composing, and playing Bach, and you force hip hop down their throat, they're not going to want to play that music. And that's where I see the problem with all business operating systems,
Mm-hmm.
is because it's such a lift. Everything you do should focus on being in line with your culture, your organization, and making it simple, not just adding things to add things. And I think that's one of the things that your software does very well and is very flexible with. So I want to hear about it a little bit. I put it on the screen, resultmaps.com. It's down in the show notes below. You can go check it out, see if it's a good fit for your company. I'm just curious, where did the idea for Result Maps come from? Because this seems like a solution to a problem that you probably had. So what is that story before we wrap up?
No doubt. Well, I've been very blessed, fortunate, pick your adjective, with the mentors I've had. And early on was, guided to be very clear about my vision, very clear about goal setting, and found right away that helped me. I wasn't trying to blow past people on the corporate ladder, but I just ascended more quickly because I had more clarity. And so then I found myself in positions where I'm leading teams and I use those same methodologies. And then I'm serving clients and they would have all these gnarly problems. And it didn't take too many before I realized, hey, you guys have lists of requirements and lists of action items and lists of shiitake to do, but there's no prioritization. And to prioritize, we need to get some clarity about where we're going and what we're trying to do and how we measure success. So I started systematizing that. Then as we started getting higher and higher stakes projects, I started expanding my team, and it was very early to the remote game before it was a thing. Like if you want to look up, it wasn't Elance, it was Rent-A-Coder. That was like the first site way back in the day. But very early on, I started hiring folks all over the world. And as my kids were growing up and my business was growing, I found I was spending all my time tracking down status updates or lecturing people on how to provide a meaningful status update. And as soon as we started automating that, and that right away made everything easier, when we married that to here are our objectives and here's clarity on where we're trying to go, I started noticing that my teams were literally running circles around very, very good teams of people at our clients. And I mean, I'm not saying it. I mean, these were top of the top individuals from top of the top schools. So it wasn't that we had the raw brain horsepower. There was something about the way we were working that was different. So that got my attention, and we're running the software to help us do it. And then over time, we started using our dashboards to run our client meetings, and our clients started asking for access to those. And that was my first thought of, okay, there may be something here. Maybe we can teach people this crazy way of working, because we work in sprints. I've been sprinting since before Agile was a thing because I'm that old. So I was never somebody who's like, well, I need to go like get the Agile certification. We've been running Agile since before there was an Agile manifesto. It was just called something else. But I didn't see that there would be ways for people to adopt this type of, let's get in here and iterate. Let's allow people to take ownership. The market really took some time to develop to that point, but we started seeing around 2016 that the market had developed, and ended up launching the software in that time frame.
That's amazing. That's a cool story. And it's also good to know that it came out of abundant success rather than more than a need for just a tool to have it. You really packaged up what was working for, like you said, some of the best teams in the world. And you're giving that to other people too. So that's super cool. I encourage you, the listener, to go check it out. I'm fascinated with the software. I'm in the midst of diving in right now. As a matter of fact, if you're listening to this, I will be well immersed in the software by that time. So very cool. Scott, I appreciate you coming on the show here and unpacking this for us. But I want to leave the listener with a question from you. So this is a question for a question. At What If, we believe in powerful questions get powerful answers. That's why there's an obnoxious upside down question mark behind me on the wall. So in terms of getting to that next level in your business transformation, becoming the CEO that will actually be capable of transforming your business and growing it, what is that one question you would want the listener to ask themselves in the context of this conversation so that they can take the next step on that journey?
That's a great question. Off the cuff, I'd say, what are the 3 ways you would love to be able to see the success in your business? Like, what are 3 measurable ways you would see a new level of success in your business, such that every time you thought about it, it put you in a good mood, it put your family in a good mood, and it was enabling the rest of your life to be awesome? What are the 3 ways you would measure success?
That's a good question. I've never thought of that question. That's so I'm going to take my own advice here and think about that for the rest of the day. Scott, I
Nice.
appreciate you coming on the show and being a phenomenal guest.
It's been my pleasure.
For those of you watching and listening, wherever you are, the offer is there. Go check out Result Maps. It's in the description down below. There's a link to it. You can go follow Scott online as well. Thank you for watching and listening. Be sure to subscribe. We love putting on this episode every single day of the week so you can become that next level CEO and actually take your business through a transformation to get it from where you are to where you ultimately want it to be in a harmonious and simple fashion. That's the whole goal here. Do less, get more. We'll see you on the next episode.